My name is Sarah Bennett, and this is the story of the night I watched my own family betray me live on the evening news. From a hospital bed, 31 weeks pregnant, unable to even get up and walk out of the room. I was flipping channels, half watching, half drifting, hooked up to a monitor that beeped every time my daughter's heartbeat dipped, when the local news cut to a segment on a charity gala at a waterfront resort marina just outside the city. Champagne, string lights, men in tuxedos shaking hands with investors. And there, for maybe 4 seconds, the camera swept past a group laughing near the bar. My father, Thomas, my mother, Linda, my younger sister, Madison, and my husband, Ethan, with his hand resting easy on the small of my sister's back, like he belonged in that photograph, in that room, in that life, without me. The same husband who had kissed my forehead that morning and told me he was leaving for a business conference in Atlanta he couldn't miss. Welcome back to the family revenge tales. I sat up so fast, the monitor cord pulled tight against my arm. My blood pressure had spiked 6 days earlier. My doctor had used the words high risk and bed rest in the same sentence. And still, somehow, my first instinct wasn't panic. It was to grab my phone and open my banking app with hands that weren't quite steady. And there it was. A charge for $4,100, VIP Gala package, charged to my personal credit card, not our joint account, mine. I called Ethan. He picked up on the second ring, and his voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had said this lie enough times to make it sound like truth. Hey babe, still stuck in these meetings, it's brutal in here. I could hear music behind him. Laughter. A string quartet. I didn't say anything about the news broadcast. I didn't say anything about the charge. I just said, okay, get some rest, and I hung up. I want to tell you that I cried. I didn't. Something in me went very still and very quiet, the way water goes still right before it freezes. I set the phone down on the blanket over my stomach, and I thought about the fact that I had spent 15 years being the responsible one, the reliable one, the daughter who fixed things. And somewhere along the way, my family had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource, a checkbook, a safety net, someone who would always, always be fine. I should tell you how we got here, because none of this happened overnight. For 15 years, I had quietly managed the financial cleanup for my father's company, a waterfront real estate and marina development business he built from nothing. Every January, while other people took vacations, I spent weeks going through the books, correcting errors, organizing records, preparing reports that made the company look sound to investors and banks. I did this without pay. I did this without a title. My father called it helping family, and every year he told me the same thing. Once we get through this next phase, Sarah, you'll be CFO. I promise you that. 15 years of promises. 15 years of not yet. My father used to say, people invest in confidence before they invest in property. And he meant it as a kind of business wisdom, but really it was the whole philosophy of our family. Appearances first, truth later, if ever. My mother ran the family's charitable foundation and threw the kind of galas that got written up in glossy magazines. My sister Madison had a fancy title, Director of Business Development, and a company car. And as far as I could tell, contributed almost nothing behind the scenes, and my husband Ethan worked as vice president of sales for my father's company, which meant his paycheck, his bonuses, his entire career depended on staying loyal to my father, not to me. I didn't understand that until I was lying in that hospital bed with nowhere to go and nothing to do but think. I asked a neighbor I trusted to bring me my laptop the next morning. My doctors wanted me still, calm, low stress. But stillness, for me, has never meant idle. I opened a blank spreadsheet and I titled it Personal Ledger. And I made 2 columns. One said what I was told. The other said what the records prove. I started filling it in. Within days, I found thousands of dollars transferred out of our joint savings account into the family business, transfers I had never approved. I found charges on my personal credit accounts I didn't recognize. I found business payments Ethan had authorized using an account that had my name on it that I never once looked at closely, because I trusted him, because that's what a wife does. Then, because old habits die hard, and because I still technically had login access to the company's internal accounting system from years of doing their books, I went looking for something else, and I found a folder. It was labeled Founder Vault, restricted access, buried 3 layers deep. I sat in that hospital bed at 2 in the morning with my daughter kicking against my ribs, and I opened it. What I found took my breath away in a way that had nothing to do with my blood pressure. Fake construction invoices, renovation contracts inflated by hundreds of thousands of dollars, shell consulting companies that existed only on paper collecting payments for work that was never done, kickback arrangements with vendors, insurance reimbursements claimed on damage that, as far as I could tell, never happened. Millions of dollars moved and hidden and disguised across years of filings. And then I saw it. My signature. My CPA license number, printed at the bottom of financial reports I had prepared in good faith. Reports that had been quietly altered after I signed off on them. My name attached to numbers I never approved. I remember sitting there in the dark, the machines beeping softly, and thinking, this isn't a family problem anymore. This is a federal problem, and my name is on it. I called Priya Shah the next morning. Priya is a tax attorney I'd worked with years earlier on an unrelated matter, someone I trusted to give it to me straight. I told her everything, and she didn't gasp, she didn't panic. She just got very calm and very clear, the way good lawyers do when the stakes are real. First, she said, we protect you. We document exactly when you learned about this and what you did next, because that timeline matters enormously. Second, we correct every filing that has your signature on it, because right now you are personally exposed. And Sarah, I need you to hear this part separately from everything else. Whatever's happening in your marriage, you handle that on its own track. Don't let one crisis blur into the other. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. This isn't simply a story about a husband who lied about a business trip. It's about a family that had spent decades treating honesty as optional, as long as the image held. While I was still confined to that bed, the lies kept coming, almost comically, if any of it had been funny. The family group chat filled up with photos supposedly from the conference, generic hotel lobby shots, a stock photo of a skyline that didn't even match Atlanta. Ethan called me that evening, tie loosened, telling me he was working late reviewing contracts. And then, for about 4 seconds, my mother posted a photo to her personal page. Champagne glasses, string lights, the marina. She deleted it almost instantly, but I'd already seen it. I stopped waiting for anyone to slip up. I started collecting evidence instead of collecting explanations. My mother came to see me alone a few days later. She sat in the chair beside my bed, and for the first time in my life, she talked to me like I was a grown woman instead of a daughter who needed managing. She told me about my father's childhood, about the foreclosure his family went through when he was young, about the shame of it, the way it followed him into every room he ever walked into as an adult. He decided a long time ago, she said quietly, that looking successful mattered more than being honest, because looking successful was the only thing that ever kept people from leaving. I understood him a little better after that conversation. I even felt something close to sympathy, sitting there, watching my mother's hands twist together in her lap like she was confessing something she'd carried alone for 30 years. For a moment, I wanted to reach for her hand and tell her it was going to be all right, the way I had told so many people it would be all right for most of my life. But sympathy is not the same as forgiveness, and it is definitely not the same as staying silent. Understanding where someone's fear comes from does not oblige you to keep protecting the lies that fear built. Ethan came home 3 days later with a bouquet of flowers and a story about a client dinner that ran long. He set the flowers on the hospital tray table, like they might fix something. I asked him, calmly, about the $4,000 charge on my card. He didn't even flinch. He just shrugged and said, "It's all family money, Sarah. It balances out eventually." I looked at him for a long moment, and I realized he wasn't lying to protect me from worry anymore. He had stopped seeing me as his partner a long time ago. He saw me as a line item, something the family could draw from whenever they needed to. That was the moment my marriage quietly ended. Right there in a hospital room, over wilting flowers and a lie so casual it didn't even sound like a lie anymore. My father called not long after. No apology, no acknowledgement. Instead, he offered me the chief financial officer position I had been promised for 15 years. 20% ownership, a six-figure salary, full executive benefits. Everything I had wanted since I was 20 years old, sitting in his office learning how to read a balance sheet, desperate for him to look proud of me. Now, finally, it was on the table. Only now, only after I had found the fraud. I asked him for time to think, and I meant it, because some small part of me still wanted to believe there was a version of this, or my family chose me for the right reasons. Not long after that call, my access to the company system disappeared entirely. Locked out, no explanation. But I had spent 15 years doing this work carefully. I kept my own records, source documents, working papers, financial summaries, copies of everything I had personally prepared over the years, stored somewhere no one else could reach. They could delete my access. They could not delete history. I gave birth to my daughter a few weeks later, Emma, 6 pounds, 4 ounces, with a cry that filled the whole room and rearranged everything inside me. I held her against my chest, and I made her a promise without saying a single word out loud. I promised her she would never grow up believing love had to be earned through endless, silent sacrifice. I promised her she would never be someone's line item. Ethan visited during my labor, and, I later learned, spent part of that same day meeting with a divorce attorney, using money quietly pulled from our joint emergency savings. When I found out, I didn't scream, and I didn't cry. I sent my attorney a single text message. Proceed. The final meeting with my father happened in his office overlooking the marina, weeks after I'd come home from the hospital with Emma. He slid a polished executive contract across the desk, the CFO offer made official. Except, buried in the language was a clause making me personally responsible for correcting years of accounting irregularities. I read it twice, and then I asked him 3 questions. I asked him why the promotion had suddenly appeared the same week I found the fraud. I asked him about the shell companies in the founder vault, and I asked him if federal investigators ever came asking questions, who exactly he expected to take the fall. He didn't answer any of them. He just looked at me, the way you look at someone who has stopped being useful to you. And for one long moment, the office was so quiet I could hear the marina traffic outside the window, boats gliding past the very view he'd built his entire reputation on protecting. So, I opened my laptop, right there in his office, while he watched, and I submitted the corrected financial filings I had spent weeks preparing with Priya. Formal disclosures, whistleblower documentation, filed properly through legal counsel, exactly the way it needed to be done. The confirmation screen loaded. Just like that, 15 years of hidden numbers left the family's control forever. I stood up, and I walked out of that office, and I never went back. That same afternoon, I signed my divorce papers, closing every financial tie between Ethan and me. That evening, I published one short, calm, public statement: my resignation from the company, my divorce, my full cooperation with the appropriate authorities. No interviews, no public fighting, just facts laid out plainly, the way I had always laid out numbers. Over the following year, federal investigators audited the company thoroughly. Millions of dollars in unpaid taxes and penalties came due. Investors pulled out one by one. The marina development projects collapsed under the weight of what they'd been hiding. My father lost the business he had spent his entire life building on a foundation of appearances. My sister started over in an ordinary corporate job, the kind she used to think was beneath her. Ethan repaid what he owed through the divorce settlement, dollar by dollar. I never celebrated any of it. I didn't need to. I just kept moving forward because I had a daughter who needed me steady. 2 years later, Emma and I moved to Charlotte. I opened my own forensic accounting firm, specializing in fraud investigation, the exact skill my family had used me for in secret for 15 years, now finally mine, out in the open, under my own name. For the first time in my life, my name is on the door of an office I built myself. No hidden work, no empty promises, no one else's approval standing between me and what I've earned. If any part of my story feels familiar to you, if you have ever spent years being the reliable one while everyone else got the recognition, I want you to know you are not alone, and you are not wrong for finally wanting more than silence. This channel exists for stories exactly like this one. Stories about the quiet strength it takes to choose truth over comfort. If it moved you, subscribe to the Family Revenge Tales so we can keep telling these stories together, and so you never miss the next one. Here is what I hope you carry with you. Integrity is rarely loud. Most of the time, it looks like one calm decision made quietly at the exact moment it would be easier to stay silent. You do not need to raise your voice to change your life. You only need to stop lying to yourself about what you deserve. There is something important underneath the story, beyond the drama of it. It shows how quietly financial manipulation can hide inside a family that looks perfectly normal from the outside, and why it matters to actually read the documents you are asked to sign rather than trusting a title like family to make something automatically safe. It shows the real difference between loyalty and complicity, and how those two things can look identical for years until a crisis forces you to tell them apart. It shows that protecting your own name, your own signature, your own reputation is not selfish, it is necessary, especially when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones putting it at risk. And most of all, it shows that walking away from wealth, status, and approval you spent your whole life chasing is not a loss. Sometimes it is the very first step toward a life that finally, truly belongs to you.